Now we are going to talk about a very well-known scripture that greatly bewilders the modern audience and has become a reason for loads of attacks on the Bible. It tells us how the bad Prophet Elisha sicced the bears at little children. Let's now look into the scripture and see who sicced who and at whom they are. First, we'll read once again in our habitual version, and then we'll say what kind of problems can be there related to choice of words in the translation. This incident happened to Elisha soon after he became a prophet. It doesn't matter where he had been, the main thing is this. We are reading 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 23-24, and I'm reading from King James Version. And he went up from thence unto Bethel, and as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. And he turned back and looked on them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tare 42 children of them. That's what happened to Elisha on his way to Bethel. What could that mean? First of all, we are slightly bewildered at once, especially if we read King James Version. If the bears mauled 42 children of them, how many were there in all? 142. 1042. Why on earth were the little children in the countryside close to the woods? Their parents must have known that the woods are home to bears, mustn't they? So why was there such a crowd of children? Did they always walk around like that? Was it an activity camp on a hike? Something must be wrong there. Now let's see what we can say about that if we mind the variety of possible translations of the same words. So, in this scripture, little children in ancient Hebrew is nearim ktanim. Hebrew requires the following order of words. First comes nouns, then adjectives. Therefore, nearim is children, ktanim, little or small. We'll deal with these 2 words one by one. We'll start with the second one, which in the English translation is naturally shifted to the first place. What is little or small in the biblical understanding? If we look through all the usages of this word in various places of the Bible, we'll discover that little ones aren't just less than big in size or very young. Let's read, for example, 1 Samuel 15:17. I'm reading now from New King James Version. Samuel is speaking to Saul. When you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? And did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? Then we'll read Deuteronomy 1:17. You shall not show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small as well as the great. Job 3:19. The small and great are there, and the servant is free from his master. From these 3 examples, we can see that small people weren't just very young of age, but also those who had a low position in the society, insignificant ones. Those scriptures have the same word in them, ktanim. Then, what is children, nearim, in the biblical usage? Alas, not just kids. This is what we can read about the meaning of this word in Strong's Concordance, which gives all the possible translations of ancient Hebrew word into the English language. Strong's Concordance provides the following definitions. Nar, a boy, lad, youth, retainer. Examples with the same word that is translated as children. Genesis 37, verse 2. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. The same word here is rendered as lad, which is natural, as he was 17 years old. Genesis 14:14. Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Where are the children here? Where is that word? Trained servants. The translators rendered that word here as trained servants. Abram armed Nearim, that is servants who he had trained, his children. Numbers 22:22. It concerns Prophet Balaam. Then God's anger was aroused because he went. An angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. Again, the Nearim here are his two servants. Those are the marvels that we discover when turning to the language of the original. In various places of the Bible, the same word was translated by different translators as children, boys, youths, servants. As a result, we easily get the little children transformed into insignificant men of low standing. Minding that the lad Joseph was 17 and Abram's servants were old enough to be armed and taken for a campaign, we arrive at servants of quite a substantial age. And then it becomes clear that a gang of such people could roam far from home in places where they could easily come across bears and at that display unprovoked aggression towards an elderly man, pick on him for being baldy. That sounds like behavior of typical hoodlums who pick on passers-by to show they are the cleverest and the coolest. They make up for the feeling of their social inferiority by calling an aged man baldy or an intellectual four eyes. That's some overgrown riffraff who indulged in badgering passers-by at leisure. Or their masters may have been disposed unkindly to prophets and had sicced them at Elisha. We don't know, but they surely weren't little children from a kindergarten or an activity camp. But we aren't through yet. Let's see what kind of 42 children there was. There we have a different word, Yeladim. But again, those aren't just children. Examples with this word. 1 Samuel 20:35. And so it was in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and the little lad was with him. We can already start figuring it out how little that lad was if he went out into the field with Jonathan. 1 Kings 3:7. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David. But I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. That's what Solomon says after he has just become king. And it wasn't at the age of 5. In the former case, we have the English lad in place of the word yeled. In the latter one, child. How old could that lad be who came with Jonathan to meet up with his fugitive friend David? We can figure out 5, 10, 14. Is that the age at which you should take children to such rendezvous? And how old was Solomon when he became king? 25, maybe even more. When he utters those words, he has already ascended the throne after which he got married to the Pharaoh's daughter. We should realize that such marriages weren't an easy thing to do. He had already been ruling his people for some time, and it wasn't because he was at a tender age that he called himself a little child, but to sound humbler before the Lord. So the context and other shades of meanings of various words that are used there reveal that the bear's victims were grown-up men. And the phrase that is translated here as little children doesn't point at their very young age. It shows a certain attitude towards them, perhaps even contempt. Good-for-nothings, but in a less rude form. Stupid little children. No wonder that in various English versions other than King James, those little children from the story about Elisha and the bears turn into youths or boys, while the word little disappears completely. That's a good case of broad options when selecting words in a translation to render the same word of the original. According to which we choose, we get quite a different picture.